Hey everyone, and welcome back to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert, and the creator of the Leaders program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI. And today we're exploring a profound impact of AI on businesses. With a leading expert in innovation and strategy, joining us is Phillipe de Ridder, founder and CEO of Board of Innovation, a global leader in helping companies navigating in the AI era. Philippe has spent over 15 years guiding Fortune 500 companies through the complexities of business transformation, and his expertise is invaluable. As we dive into the future of business, we'll be discussing the potential of AI for innovation, the challenges and opportunities of AI in the workplace, and how AI is reshaping the way we work, interact, and even experience reality. Hi, Philippe. I'm so happy that you're here.
Hi, Adi. Good morning. Nice to be here.
I'm happy that we have the chance just to think together and talk together, and I'm sure it's going to be really fascinating and interesting. So how will AI revolutionize business strategy and innovation?
Well, starting with a big question. So maybe zooming out, like we're currently, I think, in a liminal state in between the world before AI or Gen AI and where we will be afterwards. And for us, or for me, the articulation of where we will end up is in a more autonomous world. I think if we look back at the last 2 decades, we've transformed from an analog world to a digital world, which has changed how we are meeting today, how we meet our partners, how we order our food, how we watch a TV, etc. So it's been very transformational, and we're now embarking on a next wave of transformation, which in my mind is towards a world that is more autonomous, which will bring us even more convenience, efficiency, and a lot of second order benefits of that. And then to your question, how is that specifically changing company strategies, or more specifically innovation? I think from a strategy point of view, obviously all companies will need to set new strategies around that new world, around that new wave of transformation, and maybe we will dig in a bit deeper in a minute. And then specifically to innovation, product innovation, which is an area which is very close to my heart, that I've worked in for a large part of my life as well, is that will move towards more autonomous innovation engines, as I call them, meaning that we've already been building a couple of those systems, multi-agent systems that take the traditional product innovation process and basically take that end-to-end with AI agents, from uncovering unmet needs from customer insights to ideating new products to prototyping, designing them with AI image generation models, to testing them with AI moderated consumer panels, etc., etc. Still with a human in the loop, but we've seen that especially in consumer goods, these autonomous innovation engines have proven to deliver first results. So I think it's very transformational for innovation as an area specifically as well.
And how do you see the difference between automations that we had in the previous era, the last 20, 30 years for sure, with autonomous?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I think both are conflated and mixed up quite a lot. So for us, there's a really big difference between automation and what you could call autonomization, where automation is really very mechanically programming in an if this then that structure. If this event happens, then do that. It's basically codifying the typical patterns that exist in terms of choice architecture, where autonomous or autonomization is really building AI agents that learn in the moment and through feedback cycles that can take in very complex amounts of information which are not predefined, that can take decisions within that complex set of informations, and that will also be able to take actions against that, which is a very different paradigm, because you're not just codifying if this then that mechanical structures, but you're actually creating an AI agent that can operate autonomously or semi-autonomously in whatever situation that presents itself that is not predefined.
And if we're talking about the innovation processes, right now we have innovation teams working together in order to get these results, to analyze them, to research. Do you see people just working as in side to side with AI or instead of using AI?
Yeah, at the moment it's very much side to side on like the engines that we've built. For example, we've built one in fashion, and there actually the group of designers within that company has been really enthusiastic working with the AI agents or the multi-agent system in that case, because it basically takes away a lot of the manual work and that they had to do, and they can focus their time on curating and editing the outputs of the system and then steering it for the next step in the process. So I think overall, like the way I see the role of humans evolve beyond innovation for any type of function is from a role as creator, where, for example, as a designer, you create something from scratch from a blank piece of paper or a blank page on your computer, to a role of editors and curators where you work with AI agents that you can prompt and steer in certain direction, that will have suggestions for you. You edit the outputs of that, you decide what to move forward with for the next step, etc. And so far we've seen people really enthusiastic working with those models. Obviously don't want to ignore that it does come with some uncertainties and that not everyone will like the change in that aspect. I guess we all know the paradigm of who wants change where everyone raises their hands, and then who wants to change where everyone drops their hands. So there is a fair amount of change that's ahead of us and that we will all have to work through.
Yeah, you're right. And from your experience, what is the biggest advantage AI holds for businesses?
I think at the moment, a lot of the focus is on using AI for doing the current thing faster and cheaper, put in simple terms, or driving efficiency, short-term ROI in business terms. And I think that happened every time over with a new technology. If we think back towards digital and mobile technologies 20, 30 years ago, the first newspaper that we got in a digital format was just the PDF version of the physical version. So we always tend to just deploy the technology on the current way of working. And I'm actually arguing that that is not the best long-term approach. So to your question, I would see the largest potential for AI is actually to think about the next wave of AI adoption, which is using the technology for better quality output, but especially for new systems and transformations. If we think through, for example, video generation, at the moment, I'm seeing people deploying AI to do video faster and cheaper, but still the same type of video of what you did before, a movie, a commercial, whatever it is. The next wave will be about, can we deploy AI to actually create better video content? And then the next wave beyond that would be, can we actually create a new model around it? For example, real-time video generation specifically for you as a viewer based on your personal preferences. So you see a fully personal episode of your favorite TV show with your favorite characters, or maybe even with you featuring in the TV series, but an entirely new model in video and entertainment. And this is just one example. And so in a lot of my work with big companies, it's thinking through what those future possibilities are, or current possibilities, but what those true innovations are, deploying the new technology rather than deploying it on doing the current thing faster and cheaper, which I think gets you to a local optimum, but not like the longer term global optimum that will really win in any given industry or market.
Yeah, I see too. When I think about helping companies, most of them are in very early stage, just understanding how to do prompt engineering with ChatGPT. And, I created this program to teach them how to use generative AI to create new products, actually. And most of them said that it's like so far away from them. When I went to big companies, they said, okay, let's start from the beginning. Let's help our employees just use these technologies or any other, it doesn't have to be ChatGPT, any other available products, just to use whatever, like the marketing would create images or text, and that's it. And when you see the future, you understand your niche, you could create something that is utilizing this technology. And I feel that most of them are not there. They're very reluctant to use this technology. Do you feel that on your side too?
Yeah, in many ways, yes. So I think there's obviously a lot of companies that have, for example, deployed Microsoft Copilot or their own version of ChatGPT. And I think just deploying the technology and then expecting people that they will use it on their own is not typically how it works, because in my mind also the hardest part of the transformation that's ahead of us will actually not be the technology, although maybe the engineers in our teams won't necessarily agree, but I think that's going to be the easier part if you compare it to the change in human behavior and in transformation, transformation, which I think will be the much harder part.
Yeah, I had a guest right here yesterday, and he worked in PayPal like 11 years ago, and they had a project for payment through the mobile phones. And they went to test it in Stanford, I think, or something. I don't remember exactly. I think in UC maybe. And all the students who are supposed to be, early adapters, very technological, they said, no way, why would I pay with my phone, right? And it was 11 years ago. And now it's like, obviously, I don't want to take my cards. I have my mobile with me all the time. And I think the change is not the technology. The technology was available 11 years ago. It's like people getting used to working differently or using these capabilities differently or even thinking about them differently. Because right now it's either, it's really cool and we have to use it, or it's very risky and it's not secure and we don't know how would it be, or it will damage our brand, and then they will not use it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that right now you see many companies, especially the big ones, that are very reluctant to use something that they're not in full control. That's the first thing. It's not a regular system that you say, okay, if you do this, I press this, I get this result. You cannot be in control of something that is so vast and there are so many possibilities for the answer, especially if you're taking it outside the company, of course, not only to internal usage. And there are so many things that we don't know yet, like all the security issues. I'm just thinking about all these smart people trying to do what we have like in virus and antivirus wars. The same would be with AI, right? So it's just give them time and a bit more experience how to do it. And I'm sure the very bright and criminal minds are out there to use that.
Yeah, I think if you look at the speed of how fast the technology develops, we might not actually be able to keep up in terms of like the people and organizational change and the speed with that progresses, because obviously the technology in itself has never progressed as fast as it is right now in history. And as you rightly pointed out with the PayPal example, like human behavior change typically takes years on a societal level. So it's going to be interesting to see how we can keep up with how fast the technology progresses. And even if you look at the current technology and if you were to assume that it wouldn't get any better, which I think it would, but even then it would take years for the current technological capabilities to be fully productized, fully embedded, and made the most of in any given organization.
And do you see innovation in general is raising lots of questions, and maybe sometimes people are very reluctant to do innovation. They're not, as you said, they're not happy to change. Do you feel that with AI is the same as any other technology, or you see different?
I would say there's maybe one big difference is the fact that AI, or specifically Gen AI and the large language models that became mainstream, because obviously AI has been going on for decades as a broader technology domain. But given the fact that ChatGPT became so successful for individual people, and it was a general, a tool that became available for everyone, people did start to adopt it in their day-to-day use outside of work. So I think there's a broader acceptance rate, if you want, because of the fact that everyone was just able to start using it to plan their next holiday. Or my kids as well have grown so used to it, using it every day or every couple of days. So I think that might be a change or a difference compared to previous technology waves.
Yeah. And do you think that companies need to be prepared differently for this wave? In the innovation aspect, I mean.
Yes, because I think it's going to be transformational all across any function, any type of activity. And I think it's also going to fundamentally change what an organization is. And I think that's different from previous technology waves, whereas obviously we've all lived through digital transformation with all of its positive sides and flaws as well. But it hasn't changed the very nature of what an organization is. It's still about people mainly performing certain jobs and roles who are enabled by more digital processes than was the case in the analog world. So things have become more efficient. I think right now, if we think ahead and if we take an assumption that by next year, we will have more AI agents than we have people. If you look at the predictions of what Salesforce is predicting on their new Agentforce platform, they're predicting to have over 1 billion agents in the next 6 to 12 months. Microsoft launched their autonomous AI agents just a couple of weeks ago, and they are predicting kind of similar numbers. And then obviously you have other providers following suit. So what if we have more AI agents next year than we have people doing all kinds of tasks within any given organization? And if we think even further ahead with for example, the likes of Elon Musk predicting that by 2040 we will have more bipedal robots, humanoid robots, than we would have people, predicting about 10 billion of them by 2040. We will have to see if that prediction becomes reality. But I think both with digital AI agents, which is very much the short term, and then bipedal and humanoid robots, which is more the mid to longer term for mass adoption, the very nature of what an organization is might change, because it will be a combination of people performing certain roles, working in symbiosis with AI agents, both digitally as well as embodied AI physical versions of that. So at least my take on it is that in terms of organizational innovation, it's going to be more transformative than the digital transformation wave that we've lived through.
And if you're taking this future that you just described, how do you feel about this change that we would have more agents or digital workers than real workers, and in the future that could be physical, meaning robots too? How do you see that society, or this even the impact on businesses on that aspect?
Well, there's a lot of questions to unpack around that. First of all, it starts with what is that the base case scenario? Will that happen? And my take is that it will happen. I don't think anyone will stop the development of AI in general or deploying it within organizations in terms of AI agents digitally as well as robots physically. Because of the very dynamics of, in a way, how we are engineered as Homo sapiens, we continuously strive for progress. We've always done, and that's kind of how we ended up here, having taken over the planet in many ways. That's also the very construct of our societies, continuously striving for progress, but also how countries and economies are organized. We're focused on GDP growth, efficiency gains, driving secondary benefits that we could give back to other people. And within those constructs, that's how companies are organized, because they continuously strive for, on the one hand, revenue growth, and on the other hand, margin optimization, because in many ways we're governed by a stock market and striving to do well on that. So I think if we think through all of the different constructs, I think all of the incentives are pointing towards that everyone will keep on developing AI and keep on maximizing its deployment. So I don't see any scenario where we would put a stop to it. Also, if you consider that countries are kind of in a geopolitical stride against one another, with big blocs around the world trying to be the most advanced in AI and trying to get to AGI as a first as well. So if we accept that is the base case, which you might agree with or not, but it's my take on things.
We don't have to say if it's the best. We could say it's the most visible thing that we can think about. Let's say that it will happen. Let's say that we believe that this is going to be the future. How would that impact our societies, our human capabilities, our lives in general?
Yeah, so if we accept that it will happen, which we might be for or against it, the best thing we can do is design it in such a way so that humanity or humans become the hero in the story. And I don't think that that is a given conclusion. I think that's a deliberate choice that we will have to make. So obviously, and then there's a lot of things here to unpack. I think we should go all in on responsible use of AI and the AI in itself being developed responsibly. So I'm personally a huge fan of companies like Anthropic that make that a very deliberate mission of theirs. So I think that on the one hand is the way to go. Secondly, we should think through systems of universal basic income or alternative systems in case a scenario would develop that leads to people working less. I would personally hope that there's still a future where people work, because it's not just about the income, but also about fulfillment and happiness. And I think that's often overlooked. We always talk about universal basic income and the financial side of things, but jobs and employment gives us fulfillment as well. So,
yeah,
but maybe there's
it gives us meaning, it gives us things
Yes.
to do, it gives us a place to use our energies and talents and what we want to achieve. So it's much more than just getting money, although most people think about that aspect, which is very important. But it's a way for us to live our lives in a way that most of us aspire to have a way to utilize our capabilities, what we could do. If we have vacation all year long, first, it's not really vacation. It's like, it's unemployment, endless. And second, just thinking, what does it mean for you to be human? If it's just, I have money, I can eat and drink and see the sun. Is it enough for people? I don't know. Maybe it is. And maybe people have much more hobbies and they will be content. I don't know, but I don't believe, because they really need a meaning and to be influential and to be meaningful for someone else. How could they, it's not enough to get and by the way, who's going to be responsible for my income? Is it a conditional? If I do something, I don't get it. Or if somebody's upset with me, I wouldn't get it. Or if I'm not in the convention that needs to be, it's really hard to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm personally hoping for and designing for a society where we still have work, human work. And maybe there are scenarios where that isn't a full 5 days a week type of work in the very mechanical construct, which is still engineered on factory life from the Industrial Revolution. So maybe that becomes something more fluid, or less time in the week because you leverage the output or with AI agents that do part of the work for you. But I think that's our preferred scenario where we will end up. And I think also, if we look back at previous technology waves, there's always been doom and gloom scenarios being portrayed of that it would lead to massive unemployment. And so far it never has. So I don't think we will end up in a massive unemployment scenario that fast, to be honest. But I think it's a scenario that we should think through, that maybe we will evolve towards different forms of employment which are more fluid, etc., than what we currently know.
I don't really believe that people will be unemployed, most of them. Because, in a sense, if you see it from the high level, we're like small ants on this planet, always working. And we don't even stop thinking about what we're doing all the time. It's an automatic state for us to do things and to create things. And to, as a society, this is what we aspire to have. So I think that, just imagine young people with all their energies and creativity and imagination. Maybe they would play more games. I don't know, maybe I'm here mistaken, but I don't think so. I think that people they do want to achieve things, and they do want to work and do changes in the world and to impact the world. So
absolutely.
It's not enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I think the scenario that we should build for, I think, is that by combining the best of what humans and AI have to offer, is that we're able to maximize the output from that. If we take a specific example, for example, anyone that currently works in life sciences, in pharma, trying to find cures for diseases of any kind. Let's say that at the moment you would need 100 people for 5 years to find a cure for one disease, whatever it is. And obviously that's different for any type of disease, but just for the sake of the argument here, like what if with AI agents that could do part of the discovery, which is obviously already happening, you could, with the same amount of people, you could actually find cures for 100 diseases in a year, or just for 10, but you would still keep all of the same people. Like they would still have a job, but rather than finding one cure after 5 years, they would find 10 after a year. So you're able to grow and maximize the output and meaningful solutions, in this case for disease treatment, that you can find without driving down employment. And that ideally would be the scenario to aim for.
Yeah, that's a big question. If companies could use AI instead of humans, would they leave the employees and have more output as a company and create more? Or they would decide to be more restrictive in that sense and have less employees and more AI, and then do more or less the same what they have done in the past. And I believe that many big companies would go on that path because they're so used to creating things in a very strict way, and they have strict processes, and they, as you said, like this kind of innovation of creating more or creating different types of solutions and services requires so much change from these companies. So I'm not sure that they could really do it. Maybe younger companies or smaller companies could do that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think this is one of the most important decisions that leaders will be taking. Which approach do you take? Do you go for maximizing efficiency and margin, driving down cost wherever you can, but staying at the same output? Or do you choose a principal approach of maximizing output rather than margin? And I think on the short term, a lot of people will be focused on driving efficiencies and keeping the same output. But if you just were to think about this industry of life sciences in this case, and there is one company that just keeps on delivering one new drug every 2 years, let's say, or every 5 years. And then there is that other company that goes for the approach of maximizing output, and they would be launching 10 new drugs every year or 2 years. Just think through the scenario of which company in the end will win. And I know this is a theoretical example, but I'm pretty sure that the second company would win because they would grow so much faster. They would be able to penetrate into new segments that didn't exist before, being able to cure new diseases that were not curable before. So I think in the long run, companies that take the second approach have a higher likelihood of winning in their market.
And what do you think is the biggest obstacle to AI innovation in companies today?
I would say, linking it back to our earlier discussion, it's probably the change in human behavior and the organizational change. The way I often think about it is that the biggest challenge that we need to solve in making it work in organizations is that we need to match the different, what I call clock speeds, where AI is a technology that works in seconds and minutes. It can think through like hundreds of new product ideas, prototype them, or hundreds of new commercials and prototype them, etc. in seconds and minutes. Then people typically work in a clock speed of days and weeks, but organizational structures typically work in months or years even, because
Right.
they're typically quite siloed, and ideas need to move from one silo to the other because there's a predefined process before something becomes commercialized or gets to market. And I think the biggest obstacle to your question will be to match the different clock speeds, because if you have a technology that works in seconds and minutes, but your organizational structure still takes months or years to do something with the output of the technology, then it's basically the lowest denominator. Whatever is slowest will hold you back. And I think that's going to be the biggest obstacle to overcome.
Yeah. I think that if we're seeing organizations and having a new technology, in many cases, what would be an obstacle in the structure, it will be the legal team and the security team. So, and it's their job. So this is what they're supposed to be. It's not that we're like saying anything bad about these teams, but it's right now it makes sense for these two teams to think really, really thoroughly about the implications because they're very vague right now. Do you see that too?
Yes, absolutely. On the AI projects that we take on, typically in Fortune 500 type companies, obviously there's a large amount of scrutiny around them in terms of security, in terms of responsible AI, in terms of ethics around that. And I think rightfully so. I think especially now because this is all kind of new to us, or at least the scale that we're deploying it on is entirely new. So I think it makes sense that there are obstacles in a way. And I would almost flip it around, is that I would be more concerned if there weren't any obstacles on that front, because that would mean that there is no really deliberate intent to deploy this responsibly or ethically and safely for all of us. So in that sense, I'm almost happy that there are some obstacles to work through in the companies that I work with.
Yeah, and when you're saying responsible AI, which is a very wide term, I would say, what would be the main concerns you think about responsible AI?
Yeah, there's really a lot of them, and they are different for each of the use case or the field that you apply them into. The ones that we work through the most, I would say, is on the one hand bias, being aware of like the biases in the systems, just as you have human biases. It's not that like that is a vast difference between tech and humans, but it's something to be very much aware of and to work through. There is obviously IP and potential infringement, which is much more the case in creative applications than maybe when you're optimizing a supply chain or a production process. That would play less of a role. There is an important one, and that for me is actually one of the key ones, is thinking through equality or inequality and how the technology might lead to an even bigger digital divide or centralization of economic power with the happy few. So I think we should be very deliberate around how can we deploy this to actually increase equality. I think we already have enough inequality, which leads to a rupture in society. And if you let that grow at some point, there is a real risk of society breaking. So I think that's truly important. So those are just a couple ones that we often think through.
Yeah. But what you said about inequality, and it's like kind of obvious that these leaders of generative AI companies, mainly the main LLM machines, they would be the big winners here, for sure. And that's why all the investments and money is going there, right? And the people who use it, or people even, not even just, not companies, even like people who are like the employees of these companies, would be maybe less fortunate. Let's say it like this way, right? And in the past, we created these machines that we used and for surely needed us in order for you to be the users. Right now, we don't need these people. So in general, AI is consuming lots of resources and compute resources for sure. And it's going to a direction that would lead more money going to these huge companies. Right now, it's mainly Microsoft with the ChatGPT, OpenAI, and Anthropic with Claude, and maybe Gork from Elon, like in a year or so. That's it. So it's like three huge companies, would be huge companies. Right now, they're maybe startups, but this is the direction, as it seems. So the equality side is already inherently not there.
Yeah, you're very right to point that out. And I think there's a realistic scenario that AI leads to a further centralization of economic power, which is not a new trend, because if you already look at the market capitalization of big tech firms in the US stock market, but even if you look at it globally, like they've grown so much over the last couple of years. So it's a continuing pattern. So you could realistically say that is gonna even increase with AI. There are other potential scenarios where you could argue, obviously right now LLMs are all the newest thing on the block, and we all kind of assume that the quality will keep on increasing, and some companies believe that we might reach something like AGI in the next couple of years. I'm not so sure personally, but okay, but what if like the quality doesn't increase that much, and at some point LLMs actually become like a true commodity that you just plug into, for example, the multi-agent AI systems that we currently build. We just plug and play LLMs within that system. Like the latest one we built has 6 different LLMs supporting in total 13 or 15 different agents in that system. But we could easily just change Claude with the latest one model or with Llama from Meta. So if they all become interchangeable and if they would have a similar quality, maybe they become a commodity. And if we get smaller models which become more performing as well, and if we get more open source models, which we already have, maybe, I'm not saying that's the default scenario, but there could also be a scenario where actually the money won't be made in the LLMs themselves if we use smaller models that are open source and hence not centralized with some of the big players. I know when saying that the most prominent open source model, Llama, is also from Meta, so one of the big tech firms.
Right.
But I wouldn't say it's totally see your point, and I think the kind of the standard scenario is what you were talking about, but there are potentially also other scenarios.
Yeah. You mentioned Meta, Facebook. If you could just think about what we thought, 15 years ago, we would not imagine that Facebook would be such a huge, powerful company, right? And changing the way that we perceive reality in the end, because social media is the way that we consume media and we see the world outside through these lenses. So if we're taking it one step further, thinking about AI as being involved or even the main point of reference to our world, if we're still using a screen instead of going outside and just seeing what's going on, probably they would have even further power than social media and Facebook and I wanted to say Twitter, but it's a different
X.
Way, right? X. It's a different thing. But any other social media platform, TikTok. Okay, so just thinking about the implication of what would it mean for the society if first everything is going through these machines? It doesn't matter if it's only a Llama, a open source model, or a Claude or OpenAI, whatever. It's still going through these processes. We can never know, and right now we can never know if the news are real or media is real. So if there will be only a few very scarce sources, we would never ever know if it's the real thing. And then if we're saying about the influence, it's like much more than Facebook, for sure. Like Facebook is a big influencer on our lives, and we saw that in the elections. That right now we have elections. I think that today is an election day for the US, right? So
yes.
What is the meaning for, as you see it, for companies thinking about going into this, it's a new sphere of reality, actually, that we don't really know. How would that impact us as human beings?
I think it's a super important reflection to all think about. If we look at mobile technology and social media, as you pointed out, the effects have been, negative in many ways. If you look at, for example, teen suicide rates, unhappiness amongst young people especially, which I think is a huge concern. And we now see, for example, in Europe, multiple countries at least considering to ban mobile phones from schools until a certain age. You had the first country that actually implemented social media only to be allowed from, I think, 15 or 16 years old. So you see that we start...
Where was it? In Belgium?
I think that was Norway, I think.
Norway.
But I know many European countries are thinking through the ways of how can we break that cycle of actually our new generation being unhappier than any previous generation because of mobile technology, social media, and the effects that has on them. So I think that's a very fundamental realization after the previous wave of digital and social media. So I think it's, to your point, like a super important point to think through, like what will the next wave do for us, and how can we maybe take deliberate actions or decisions right now rather than having to wait 2 decades to then realize that, well, actually we've made a whole young generation unhappy, and we need to do something about it. To your point in terms of fake news or just an alternative reality, I think at the moment, if you query an LLM, and I was doing it with, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she was querying ChatGPT with life existential questions. For example, what is there after
the meaning
death?
Of life?
Yeah, what is
After
the
that?
meaning of life? What happens after people die? And I was actually quite surprised in reading the answer of the LLMs is that they give a quite diverse and quote-unquote neutral answer, saying there is no one answer to that question, but there are various perspectives that people take, religious perspectives, etc. It actually gave a much more nuanced answer than if you were to ask it from a average human being that would answer the question with certain biases or whatever you believe in. And so I think right now LLMs are still quite diverse, if that's a good way of calling that. But I think there is the risk that at some point companies will start engineering the LLMs to represent a certain way of looking at life, a certain lifestyle, a certain conviction or set of beliefs. And I think if we're not aware of those, and that just kind of happens behind the scenes in a way, like that might have a really big impact on how we all start to think about things that happen around us. So I think that's something really important to watch out for.
Yeah, I think that we already see that on social media and in media in general, that it's not neutral for sure. So it's the way that you tell the story is, and it's influenced by the people who are creating these stories or the companies who are holding these media outlets and so forth. And it will not be different with AI, I guess. Even more than that, I think that it's not only the decision of someone who's responsible for these algorithms in these companies, just thinking that in the future, people will find a way to inject data or to change the output in a way. I'm sure people are very creative being criminal. So they will find a way to give you the answer that they want you to have in front of you, for sure. So I think that what we see right now is like going to this very specific direction of having a very digital life. We already have that in the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And it's another step in that direction. And it seems that people would need to be more critical thinkers, for sure. Just thinking, where is this answer coming from? Or do I trust it or not? Do I trust in general, what is in front of me or not? Because the senses are it's not like in the real world. We get all the senses working together and trying to understand what's going on. And in front of a screen, especially if it's a device, it's even further, it's harder. So this takes me to my next question. How will AI assistants and avatars and digital versions of people change work and interactions in the work environment as you see it?
Yes, first of all, I couldn't agree more that critical thinking is such an important skill to teach towards all of our kids and the new generation right now already, and even more so in the future. Then to your question around AI avatars, and maybe starting off with what we mean with that. So an AI avatar is basically, you have different versions, but for this one, let's say it's a digital replica of yourself that you could have with systems like Synthesia and HeyGen, which are kind of the front runners in the space. And given how fast the technology is developing, it's almost indistinguishable from the real person.
Right.
Or we will soon get there. So that means that there could be an AI avatar of Adi and an AI avatar of Philippe actually being on this podcast right now or in the very near future that have a conversation that sounds like us, looks like us, and also from a content perspective, if it is trained on like all of your previous podcasts and all of my previous talks and presentations and articles that I've written, might even from a content perspective be very much similar. So that's a reality that we're trending towards. So that obviously opens up a whole lot of questions. For example, how does that change our idea of identity? Because right now our identity is just us, our physical form. What if we have an AI avatar that starts showing up for us in meetings, that gives a lecture for us, does whatever we want to do? Obviously, it might also scale the idea of like the time that we have, because if you have an AI avatar that can be in various places at the same time, it's a complete change of model of like the 24/7 hours that you have in a week. It poses questions around liability, like what if I have my avatar give a lecture on my behalf, but it says something really stupid or something really damaging? Who is liable? Is it me, or is it the system that provides the AI avatar? It poses questions around, will we get paid for work that our AI avatar does, or won't we get paid for it? So there's loads of questions around it, but I think it's to me it's an often overlooked development at the moment. Everyone is talking about AI agents, etc., but I think AI avatars might be quite impactful in the next 1 or 2 years, and there's a lot of questions and scenarios to think through there as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of it. Did you see this? I think it's called Google Notebook, that you have people creating a podcast. So it doesn't have an avatar, like a visual yet, but it has the audio version of a podcast.
Yeah,
it's really good.
It's really good. I've used it a couple of times also for clients, for example, when I wanted to send them some inspirational reading material, is to not just send it to them in a text format, but also in a podcast that they could listen to when they go out for a run or to the gym or whenever they commute. And yeah, it's actually pretty good. And I saw some people that translated like the audio podcasts into avatars as well, with I think it was HN or Synthesia. So they showed up like we are showing up right now in this podcast, which was quite funny. But yeah, that technology is there already today, right?
Yeah, I think that we're always talking about creating generations of creativity, and in general, it really makes sense. But on the other side, somebody needs to consume this, right? So somebody needs to want to hear the podcast, the videos, the visuals, the whatever, the books, the stories, the articles. Somebody needs to consume that. And if we create something that has no real value, and it's like, it's obvious that AI could write a book, is it really good? So that's a question that I had from my interview yesterday. He said that he has he created an AI that could write a book really easily and even publish it on Amazon. So he has lots of these kinds of books, but they're not good enough. They're not that interesting. They're not that innovative and creative. But still, it could be done. And just the thinking of creating these kinds of an avatar, it could be me, explicitly a specific person, but it could be the best, merging the best salesperson that you have in the company into one avatar, and he will do the sales for you, and he will be extra successful because he has all the insights. And I guess that these salespeople will not get any benefits from it, maybe the other way around, just using their talents into doing something new for the company, right?
Yeah, that's a very likely scenario. So we will indeed see AI avatars of ourselves, but also AI avatars just as, on their own, not modeled on any specific human being. And to your point on what you were saying earlier, like I think we will see a proliferation of any types of digital content, because the cost of generating as well as distributing any type of digital content, whether that's a digital book, a music song, a short video, that cost will approach zero at some point, or at least trend towards zero. So that means you can generate billions of new music songs every day, billions of new short movies on social media, billions of new books if you wanted to. So a proliferation of digital content, whereas on the other hand, we will need and likely have AI assistants that curate all of that down to the ones that we really need to have a look at. which is a cartoon a couple months ago, which always reminds me of that. On the one hand, you have a person that just types in a couple of words and then as an AI system write out a whole email and says, well, I'm so happy I only need to write a couple of words. And then I get like a long written email, and then there's a person on the other end of it receiving the email saying, well, I'm so happy that AI summarizes this email into just a couple of words, so I don't need to read the whole thing. And that's kind of a dynamic that we probably go through in digital content in general in the next couple of years. Yeah. Sure. If I just have to name one, I would say go beyond focusing on leveraging the technology to drive efficiencies, and think about which new possibilities that it unlocks. What are the systemic innovations, transformations that we talked about in the beginning of the podcast that it will enable in your industry, and how can you start investing in that so you don't miss that more transformational wave while you get stuck into driving cost efficiencies in doing the current thing faster and cheaper, which I don't think is the long-term play. Likewise, thank you so much, Adi, for having me.